You know, when it comes to royal drama, Sarah Ferguson has always been the crown's most unpredictable firecracker. But what's surfacing now? About her spending habits, her lifestyle, her almost cinematic indulgence, feels like something straight out of a royal scandal documentary. We're not talking about the occasional splurge or a little retail therapy. No, this was feasting like Henry VIII himself had returned to Buckingham Palace. Tens of thousands blown on trainers that barely touched the gym floor. Shopping sprees that turned into full-scale operations. So excessive that even the Queen reportedly had to step in and quietly pick up the tab. According to royal biographer Andrew Loney, whose new tell-all The Rise and Fall of the House of York dives deep into the Duchess's chaotic finances, Sarah wasn't just living large. She was living like money could never possibly run out. His book paints a portrait of luxury without limits. Designer shopping trips, private trainers, dinner tables that looked like they belonged in Versailles. Imagine a life where the word budget simply didn't exist, where bills were an afterthought, because someone, somewhere, would always bail you out. And often that someone was none other than Queen Elizabeth II herself. Now pause and think about that. How does a woman who once had the world's most prestigious address end up drowning in millions of pounds of debt? The numbers are staggering. In 1994, Coutts Bank, the same exclusive institution trusted by the royal family, demanded that Sarah pay £500,000 in just 14 days. It was a financial crisis so dire that Her Majesty personally intervened, writing a royal bailout to save her former daughter-in-law from collapse. And that wasn't an isolated rescue. Multiple insiders have revealed that the Queen quietly stepped in again and again over the years, clearing debts, soothing scandals, and shielding the monarchy from public embarrassment. But how did it spiral so far out of control? Loney's account paints a vivid and, frankly, shocking picture of unchecked extravagance. Take her Christmas shopping, for instance. Two Selfridges employees reportedly spent an entire day in a VIP suite, selecting hundreds of luxury items for her private holiday party. And that's just one example of how deep the spending rabbit hole went. Sources say she had assistants picking up cosmetics and high-end beauty products every few days, all charged to her personal accounts. By the time the bills came in, Fergie owed more than £51,000 to Selfridges alone. Even her household staff described scenes that sound more like a period film than a modern home. Every evening, tables were piled high with a side of beef, a leg of lamb, and an entire roast chicken. A royal feast for one, most of which ended up uneaten and tossed by morning. One former employee even recalled having to arrive at 4:30 a.m. just to put fresh watercress on ice, in case the Duchess fancied it later that day. And then there were the personal trainers and stylists, reportedly paid hundreds of pounds an hour to simply wait on standby. One trainer was said to earn $65,000 a year, yet Fergie used their services only twice in 12 months. Meanwhile, her reputation wavered, her charities distanced themselves, and yet, through it all, the Queen remained quietly compassionate. Palace sources confirmed that Elizabeth II's affection for Fergie never fully faded. Despite all the chaos, Her Majesty saw something redeemable, perhaps a woman lost between privilege and pressure. But by 1994, the situation had become impossible to hide. Fergie's debt had ballooned to an eye-watering $3.7 million. The lavish dinners, impulsive shopping trips, and high-maintenance lifestyle had finally outpaced even royal rescue efforts. So we have to ask, was it carelessness, loneliness, or the crushing illusion of royal glamour that pushed her to the edge? Because this wasn't just about money. This was about identity. A woman who once had everything, watching it all slip away, one designer receipt at a time. And yet, if there's one thing we've learned about Sarah Ferguson, it's that she never truly disappears. She survives, quietly, cleverly, always managing to re-emerge, just when everyone counts her out. As the years rolled on, Sarah Ferguson's financial world began to crumble. Not with a crash, but with a slow, almost inevitable unraveling. At one point, things got so bad that she reportedly needed bank approval just to write small checks. Imagine that, a woman who once signed invitations for royal galas, now needing permission to buy groceries. When local suppliers stopped receiving payments, whispers began to spread. A neighborhood newsagent finally cut her off after a modest $500 bill went unpaid. Soon the dominoes started to fall. The butcher refused service, the dry cleaner followed suit, and even her petrol card was confiscated as arrears piled up. The Duchess of York, once surrounded by luxury, was now living in a world of bounced payments and fading patience. And yet, she didn't seem worried. Those who worked for her recall a woman fueled by blind optimism. She always believed the next big deal was right around the corner. Maybe a TV appearance, a book advance, a brand partnership, or some quiet royal favor that would magically make everything right again. But that fantasy couldn't last. In 2009, Fergie reportedly signed a lease on a $3 million mansion at the exclusive Wentworth estate in Surrey, paying $8,000 a month for a home she never even lived in. When the owners decided to return early, she was forced to pay a 6-month penalty of $50,000. And this wasn't the first time she'd paid for properties she never occupied. It was a repeating cycle. Impulse, regret, and another crushing bill. These weren't just bad financial decisions, they were symptoms of something deeper. A pattern of trying to prove she still belonged in a world that had long since closed its gates. Even her royal privileges became entangled in the chaos. Loney's research revealed that the Duchess charged $6,500 to the Queen's private mail service, a system reserved strictly for official correspondence. But Fergie allegedly used it daily, not for palace business, but for lavish gift-sending sprees. Silver letter openers, engraved cufflinks, expensive money clips, all tokens meant to keep her social circle alive. To her, these were gestures of generosity. To others, they were glaring symbols of entitlement. Behind the polished smiles, someone else was always paying the price. When Prince Andrew's office finally reviewed her growing list of unpaid expenses, 12 staff members were dismissed. Some hadn't seen a paycheck in months. Loyal workers, her driver of 10 years, her dresser Jackie Malloud, her assistant Sally Fish, all shown the door in quiet waves of cost-cutting. One insider summed it up bitterly. It wasn't cruelty, it was chaos, the kind born of greed and denial. And that chaos extended everywhere. Former aides describe her travel habits as extravagant, bordering on absurd. She would routinely miss flights that were non-refundable, wasting thousands in the process. And when she did travel, it was a royal parade of excess. Airport staff watched in disbelief as 25 suitcases were unloaded, costing her anywhere from $800 to $4,000 in excess baggage fees. 5 of those suitcases, insiders say, were packed entirely with makeup and toiletries. It wasn't practicality, it was performance. Every suitcase, every purchase, every flight was part of the illusion that she was still the Duchess, still part of that gilded world. By the mid-1990s, the illusion began to shatter. Credit was cut off. Newspapers splashed her financial disasters across front pages. Even the palace, so used to cleaning up royal messes, that began to distance itself. Eventually, Sarah had to start selling her personal belongings, jewelry, artwork, even furniture, just to stay afloat. The fairy tale marriage to Prince Andrew had already ended, leaving her without protection, without royal allowances, without the comforting cushion of status. When she released her autobiography My Story in 1996, she finally admitted what the press had whispered for years. She was $3.3 million overdrawn. In her own words, she called herself Santa Claus all year, round, spending money she didn't. Have to keep people around her happy, but happiness, built on fantasy, can't last forever. Because underneath the designer labels and glossy magazine, Smiles was a woman fighting a silent war against insecurity, loneliness, and the fear of irrelevance. The woman who once dined with kings now sat surrounded by overdue bills and fading headlines. And yet, her story isn't just about debt. It's about illusion. The illusion of wealth, of importance, of endless privilege. A desperate performance for an audience that had long stopped applauding. Andrew Loney calls her life a cautionary tale of ambition and financial recklessness. He argues that Sarah's charm and charisma, her greatest gifts, became her undoing. Her belief that generosity could buy love, that confidence could replace accountability, and that connections could erase consequences, all combined into a perfect storm. By the time the debts reached their peak, even those closest to her began to use the same haunting phrase, unmanageable, charming in public, chaotic in private. Still, to her credit, Sarah has never pretended otherwise. She's openly called herself hopeless with money. She's admitted to being impulsive, to trusting the wrong people, and to falling into the same traps over and over again. In her later years, she tried to rebuild through charity work, children's books, and TV projects. There were moments where the old warmth and humor shone through again. She spoke candidly of her failures, insisting she'd learned from them. But even now, the world remains divided. Some see her as a woman unfairly vilified, the scapegoat of a system that quietly enables the same behavior in others. Others see her as the embodiment of royal excess, proof that privilege without discipline leads only to downfall. Maybe the truth lives somewhere in between, because behind every lavish banquet, behind every bottle of perfume, behind every shopping spree, was a woman terrified of disappearing, afraid that if she stopped spending, stopped dazzling, the world would stop noticing. And that's the tragedy of Sarah Ferguson, a woman who once lived like royalty long after the crown had moved on. Her every indulgence became a headline. Her every mistake, a spectacle. In the end, the Duchess of York's life is a reminder that the cost of pretending to be a queen is realizing you never were one.